Hey, today I'm going to be teaching you about music notes and explaining how having a deeper understanding of them will cause you to rap in music more effectively and just work with music more effectively in general. So without further ado, let's get it! What's up, everybody? This is Mize with ColeMizeStudios.com, bringing you another segment of Be a Better Rapper Now. Now, when you're first learning how to rap and you're focusing on trying to improve your flow, you may get confused when you first learn about music notes, such as 8th notes, 16th notes, 32nd notes, etc. You may be wondering what's the difference between them and why are they important? Now, at the moment, they may seem sporadic and random, but hopefully by the end of this video, you will see them in a whole new light, which will give you the ability to hear things in music that you've never heard before and consequently allow you to work that much more effectively within it. Now, on the surface, we measure music in time. For example, this song is 3 minutes and 30 seconds and the tempo is 89 beats per minute. This is a zoomed out view of the song in its entirety. Now, if we zoom in just a little bit further, we will notice the song's structure and how it's broke up into different sections, such as intros, verses, hooks, and outros. And if we zoom in even further into those sections, we will notice that they're measured in bars. For example, the hook is 8 bars and the verse is 16 bars. Now, if we peek under the hood of these bars, we'll notice that there's a lot of precise measurements going on within them on a molecular music level with something called music notes. Now, there's several different types of music notes, but don't let that confuse you because they're really easy to understand because they're actually named by how much space they take up within each bar, which is determined by how long they're sustained. Now, let's take out our magnifying glasses and take a look at each note and see what sets them apart. So the longest note in the bar is called a whole note because it takes up the whole bar. Since these notes are so long and sustained, typically vocals or instruments that use a whole note are typically placed in the background of a song to make more room for all the other instruments and vocals. These notes are great for bass lines, vocal harmonies, strings, brass, woodwinds, electronic instruments, pretty much everything but percussion. These notes tend to act as like a blanket or like a foundation to build the rest of the track on top of. So what I've done is I've made a simple beat, and each instrument in this beat is using one of the notes that we're discussing. So for the whole notes, I'm using the bass line. Let's check it out. See, just one long sustained note for the whole bar. And like I said, this could be a vocal harmony. It could be anything like that, sustained. Now the next note is called half notes because it takes up half the bar, which means you can fit 2 half notes in one bar. Since these notes are still sustained for a long period of time, the same concept applies as I mentioned with whole notes. The only difference is that half notes are being played at twice the speed as whole notes. And so for the example in this beat, I'm using like a string, like almost synthy sound to represent these half notes. Let's take a listen. Now the next note that we're going to look at is called quarter notes. They're named this because quarter means 1/4, which means there's a total of 4 quarter notes in one bar, just like there's 4 quarters in $1. And we measure tempo by the amount of beats per minute. And typically there are 4 beats per bar because beats are typically using quarter notes. Quarter notes are also known as the 4 count, which is what you bob your head or you tap your feet to keep your rhythm and stay on beat. These are the first notes that you will typically see drums using. And oftentimes in music, you will hear the kick fall on the 1st and 3rd quarter note and the snare fall on the 2nd and 4th quarter note. Now, vocals that use quarter notes are typically sustained and they're used to make harmonies, which is really good too if you're wanting to create more of a dynamic in a verse or a hook. So for my quarter notes for this beat, I'm using a kick drum and a snare drum. And as I mentioned before, this also falls in line with how you would count beats per measure, which lead up to beats per minute. So I'm going to play the metronome first. You can hear it clicking. You hear that? And now listen how the kick and the snare fall right on top of that, because they're both using quarter notes. Now, 8th notes is where you usually first start seeing cadences being introduced with rap vocals and also percussion elements such as hi-hats. And as the name implies, there are 8 eighth notes per bar, And eighth notes really help building a sense of speed and momentum in the track, even if the track's really not that fast. So for this beat, I chose to use hi-hats as my eighth notes. So let me just zoom in right here so you can see it a little bit better, and this is how it sounds. Now the next note is 16th notes. And I like to think of 16th notes as like the sweet spot for rappers. And a lot of rappers' cadences tend to use 16th notes because it's a really good medium. It's not too fast and it's not too slow. And as the name implies, there's 16 16th notes per bar, and the speed and the momentum gets really cranked up using these when you're doing rap vocals or using extra percussion elements. And to demonstrate the 16th notes in this beat, I'm going to be using a synthesizer to create a fast-paced melody. Let's zoom in really quick so you can get a closer look at it, and let's listen to that. And the last music note that I'm going to discuss are 30-second notes, because these notes are fast. In fact, they're a little bit too fast to be used for extended periods of time, especially on rap vocals. And I mentioned before when I was discussing whole notes how since those notes are so long and sustained and they take up so much space, they tend to get placed in the back of a mix of a track to leave room for everything else. Well, with 30-second notes, you get a similar effect because there's so little space in between each 30-second note that you almost get that sustained type of effect where there's a little bit of a break and a gap. So 30-second notes, if they're going to be used for a long extended period of time, will typically probably get placed in the back to give more room for the rest of the track. And of course, the extent of this effect will be determined by the tempo of the song. And of course, as the name implies, there's 32 30-second notes in each bar. And I like to think of 30-second notes as a place in musical time that you dip in and out of. It's not a place where you stay and you reside for long periods of time. It's kind of like visiting your in-laws. And so to demonstrate 30-second notes for this beat, I used a synthesizer. And since it's so fast, it sounds almost like a rising or swelling effect, okay? But before that, I just want to play for you hi-hats so you can more easily distinguish the separation between the notes and how small they are and how it almost sounds sustained, okay? So here are the hi-hats first. And now let's take a look at the synthesizer. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the beat in a 4-bar loop instead of just 1 bar, and I'm going to introduce all the elements on top of each other so you can see how that all comes together. Let's take a listen. So first we got the whole notes, which is the bass line. Now we're going to introduce the strings for the half notes. Now for the quarter notes up next, we're going to bring in the drums. Now we're really going to pick up the momentum some more with eighth notes using hi-hats. Yeah, it just gives it a different sense of speed now. Now we're going to introduce 16th notes using a synthesizer. And now we're going to bring in that swell that I created with the synthesizer using 30-second notes. So in summary, whole notes, half notes, and quarter notes are great for creating vocal harmonies. And 8th, 16th, and 32nd notes are perfect for creating rap cadences. And rappers' cadences tend to consist mainly of 16th notes and dip in and out of that 32nd note range when a little bit more momentum and speed is desired. However, feel free to use as many different combinations of notes within a bar as your heart desires. For example, you may use a half note for half of the bar, and then you may start using 16th notes and maybe dip in and out of 32nd notes for the second half of the bar. Please remember that the purpose of this video is to help you understand music in a deeper way. But remember that in rapping, there are no rules. There's only techniques. And music is all about feeling and emotion. So don't allow yourself to be held down and restricted by this information, but instead use it as a tool and your emotions and feelings as your guide. And make sure you look out for my next video because I'm going to be using the same beat and I'm going to be rapping 16 bars to it, a verse. And I'm going to break the whole verse down and we're going to look at the notes that make up the cadence that I chose for that verse. And if this is your first time being here, go ahead and copy a free copy of my ebook, The #1 Fundamental to Rapping, where I'm sharing with you tips and techniques that I've gathered over the 17 years that I've been rapping, and you can soak it up all in one day. It'll also sign you up to my newsletter where you'll get exclusive free content such as the beat that you heard in this video, bar sheets, articles that I write on my website about the music industry and various topics. And it's the best way to stay in contact with me if you have a question. I love hearing from you guys and I respond back to everybody. There's the subscribe button, and down there is a video playlist with every single how to rap video tutorial that I have done in chronological order for your viewing pleasure. This is Mize with woodwinds bringing you another segment of Be a Better Rapper Now. Until next time, y'all take care. We'll holler at you.